The studio buzzed with anticipation as the cameras rolled for another episode of the late-night talk show hosted by Stephen Colbert. The audience, a mix of loyal fans and curious newcomers, settled into their seats, their applause a practiced rhythm. Tonight's guest was Elon Musk, a figure whose name alone sparked fascination and contention. Colbert, known for his sharp wit and ability to navigate conversations with charm, took his place behind the desk, his smile a polished mask. Musk, seated across from him, exuded a restless energy, his posture casual, but his eyes alert, scanning the room as if calculating its dimensions. The stage was set for a conversation that promised to be anything but ordinary. What could go wrong when two such outsized personalities collided? Would the exchange be a friendly sparring match, or would it veer into uncharted territory? The opening segment unfolded smoothly, with Colbert lobbing light-hearted questions about Musk's latest ventures. The audience laughed on cue as Musk described his vision for colonizing Mars, his words laced with the grandiose confidence that had become his trademark. But beneath the surface, a tension simmered. Colbert, ever the provocateur, began to steer the conversation toward a topic that had dominated headlines: the ethics of artificial intelligence. It was a subject Musk had championed, warning of its dangers while simultaneously pushing its boundaries through his companies. Why did Musk seem so contradictory, preaching caution yet racing toward innovation? Was he a visionary or an opportunist, cloaked in idealism? Colbert's questions grew pointed, his tone shifting from playful to probing. The audience sensed the change, their laughter replaced by murmurs of intrigue. Musk leaned forward, his expression tightening. He wasn't here to be dissected. He answered with measured precision, emphasizing the need for humanity to harness artificial intelligence responsibly. But Colbert pressed harder, questioning whether Musk's own projects were escalating risks faster than they were solving them. The host's words carried an edge, implying that Musk's ambitions might be more about personal glory than global good. Was Colbert baiting him, or was this just his style, peeling back layers to reveal the truth? The audience leaned in, captivated by the escalating friction. Musk's responses grew clipped, his patience visibly thinning. He wasn't accustomed to being challenged so directly, especially not in a setting designed for entertainment. Then came the spark that threatened to ignite the entire exchange. Colbert, with a sly grin, referenced a recent controversy surrounding Musk's public statements on artificial intelligence regulation. He suggested that Musk's warnings were less about protecting humanity and more about deflecting scrutiny from his own company's practices. The accusation hung in the air, bold and unapologetic. The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. Musk's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as he absorbed the jab. For a moment, silence gripped the studio, the kind that precedes a storm. Had Colbert gone too far? Would Musk let the slight pass, or would he retaliate? The answer came swiftly as Musk's voice, low and deliberate, cut through the tension. He accused Colbert of twisting his words for cheap applause, a move that drew a mix of cheers and uneasy murmurs from the crowd. The battle lines were drawn and the night was only beginning. The air in the studio crackled with the aftermath of Musk's sharp retort. Colbert, momentarily thrown by the guest's accusation of pandering, adjusted his tie, a subtle gesture that betrayed his unease. The audience, now fully invested, watched, with bated breath, their earlier amusement replaced by a hunger for what would come next. Musk sat back, his posture deceptively relaxed, but his gaze was locked on Colbert, unyielding and intense. The host, no stranger to verbal sparring, recovered quickly, his smile returning, though it carried a brittleness that hadn't been there before. He leaned forward, determined to regain control of the conversation, but the dynamic had shifted. The exchange was no longer a performance. It was a duel. Colbert pivoted, attempting to lighten the mood with a question about Musk's electric car empire, hoping to steer the discussion to safer ground. But Musk wasn't ready to let the previous slight go. He interrupted, his voice steady but laced with irritation, pointing out that Colbert's earlier jab about artificial intelligence ignored the complexity of the issue. He spoke of the countless hours his team spent grappling with ethical dilemmas, a reality he felt Colbert had trivialized for a quick laugh. The audience stirred, some nodding in agreement, others whispering, unsure whether to side with the guest's earnestness or the host's charisma. Colbert's expression flickered, a mix of surprise and calculation, as he realized Musk was not here to play the usual talk show game. The conversation veered back to artificial intelligence, but now it was Musk driving the narrative. He described the potential for technology to outpace human oversight, painting a vivid picture of a future where unchecked algorithms could reshape society. His words were passionate, almost evangelical, and the audience found themselves drawn in, captivated by the weight of his vision. Colbert, sensing the shift in momentum, tried to interject with a quip, but Musk pressed on, undeterred. The host's attempts to regain the upper hand felt increasingly forced, his humor landing flat against Musk's unrelenting seriousness. The tension was palpable, a tightrope stretched taut between the two men, each refusing to yield. Then, in a moment that would ripple through the studio, Colbert made a misstep. Eager to reclaim his authority, he accused Musk of fear-mongering, suggesting that his dire warnings about artificial intelligence were a publicity stunt to boost his brand. The remark was meant to sting, to paint Musk as a showman rather than a savior, but it backfired. Musk's eyes flashed with indignation and he leaned forward, his voice cutting like a blade. He called Colbert's accusation lazy, a cheap shot from someone who hadn't bothered to understand the stakes. The audience erupted, some cheering Musk's defiance, others stunned by the raw confrontation. Colbert's smile faltered, his composure cracking under the weight of Musk's words. The guest had turned the tables and the host was scrambling to keep up. The studio lights seemed to burn hotter as the confrontation between Stephen Colbert and Elon Musk reached a new intensity. Colbert, visibly rattled by Musk's scathing rebuke, gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles whitening. The audience, now a sea of rapt faces, hung on every word, their earlier whispers replaced by an electric silence. Musk's accusation that Colbert's critique was lazy had landed like a thunderclap, and the host's usual quick wit seemed to falter under the weight of the moment. He tried to pivot, flashing a strained smile, but the gesture felt hollow, a performer caught off guard in his own arena. Musk, meanwhile, sat with a steely calm, his earlier irritation now channeled into a quiet confidence that dominated the stage. Colbert attempted to redirect the conversation, this time focusing on Musk's role in shaping public discourse through his social media presence. The topic was a minefield, given recent debates about online influence and responsibility, and Colbert saw an opportunity to regain footing. He questioned whether Musk's outspokenness empowered constructive dialogue or merely fueled division. The question was loaded, designed to put Musk on the defensive, but the guest was ready. Musk responded with a measured intensity, arguing that open platforms were essential for truth to emerge, even if the process was messy. He turned the question back on Colbert, suggesting that mainstream media, including shows like this one, often curated narratives to fit preconceived agendas. The audience gasped, some clapping in approval, others shifting uncomfortably at the audacity of the claim. The exchange grew fiercer as Colbert pushed back, defending the role of journalism and late-night commentary in holding power to account. His voice rose, tinged with indignation, as he accused Musk of undermining trust in institutions while dodging accountability for his own influence. The host's passion was undeniable, but it bordered on desperation, as if he were fighting not just Musk, but the shifting tide of public sentiment. Musk, unfazed, leaned into the challenge, his responses sharp and unrelenting. He pointed out inconsistencies in how media outlets, including Colbert's network, framed stories to favor certain viewpoints. The audience was divided, some cheering Musk's boldness, others loyal to Colbert's familiar charm, but all were gripped by the raw intensity of the clash. Then came a moment that tilted the scales further. Colbert, in a bid to land a decisive blow, made a cutting remark about Musk's wealth, implying that his advocacy for free speech was a luxury afforded by his billions, disconnected from the realities of ordinary people. The comment was meant to wound, to paint Musk as an out-of-touch elitist, But Musk seized the opportunity, his voice dripping with disdain as he called the jab hypocritical. He accused Colbert of hiding behind his everyman persona while cozying up to corporate interests, a remark so pointed it drew audible shock from the crowd. The host's face flushed, his attempt at a comeback stumbling as Musk's words echoed in the studio. The guest had not only deflected the attack, but turned it into a weapon, leaving Colbert exposed and the audience buzzing with the thrill of the upset. The studio pulsed with the raw energy of a battle neither Stephen Colbert nor Elon Musk had anticipated. Colbert, stung by Musk's accusation of hypocrisy, sat rigid, his usual charisma buried beneath a veneer of barely concealed frustration. The audience, now a living entity of gasps and murmurs, sensed the shift in power. Musk's pointed remark about Colbert's ties to corporate interests had sliced through the host's carefully crafted image, leaving him vulnerable in a way rarely seen on this stage. Musk, by contrast, exuded a quiet ferocity. His eyes locked on Colbert, daring him to respond. The air was thick with expectation, every second stretching into eternity as the two men faced off in a clash that had transcended the bounds of a typical talk show. Colbert, determined to reclaim his authority, leaned forward, his voice steady but laced with a barely masked edge. He shifted the conversation to Musk's recent business decisions, particularly those tied to labor practices at his factories. The topic was a calculated move, tapping into public debates about workplace conditions and corporate responsibility. Colbert's questions were sharp, accusing Musk of prioritizing profits over people, a charge meant to resonate with the audience's sense of fairness. The crowd responded with murmurs of agreement, some nodding as Colbert painted Musk as a callous tycoon, but the host's aggression betrayed a hint of desperation, as if he were grasping for a lifeline to turn the tide. Musk, however, was not so easily cornered. He responded with a calm that belied the intensity of the moment, detailing the challenges of scaling innovative industries while maintaining ethical standards. His words were precise, almost surgical, as he dismantled Colbert's accusations with data and context, framing himself as a problem solver rather than a villain. The audience, initially swayed by Colbert's moral posturing, began to waver, some clapping for Musk's clarity, others torn by the complexity of the issue. Musk didn't stop there. He turned the spotlight back on Colbert, questioning the host's selective outrage and asking why similar scrutiny wasn't applied to other industries. The jab was subtle but devastating, exposing the host's narrative as potentially performative. The confrontation reached a boiling point when Colbert, visibly agitated, interrupted Musk mid-sentence, a rare breach of his polished demeanor. He accused Musk of deflecting, his tone dripping with condescension as he suggested the guest was dodging accountability yet again. The remark was rude, a personal slight that cut through the pretense of civil discourse. The audience froze, sensing the line that had been crossed. Musk's expression darkened, his patience finally snapping. In a voice that carried both fury and precision, he unleashed a verbal onslaught, calling Colbert a sanctimonious opportunist who thrived on moral grandstanding while ignoring his own complicity in a biased media landscape. The words were a gut punch, each one landing with devastating clarity. The audience erupted, some cheering Musk's audacity, others stunned by the public humiliation of their beloved host. Colbert sat speechless, his face a mask of shock and anger as Musk's tirade left him stripped of his usual defenses. The studio was a cauldron of emotion, the audience teetering between awe and discomfort as Elon Musk's blistering takedown of Stephen Colbert reverberated through the room. Colbert, his face flushed and his hands clenched, sat frozen, the weight of Musk's words pinning him to his chair. The guest's accusation, that Colbert was a sanctimonious opportunist, had stripped away the host's veneer of control, leaving him exposed in a way that felt both shocking and inevitable. The crowd, divided in their loyalties, buzzed with a mix of cheers and uneasy murmurs, some reveling in the chaos, others unsettled by the unraveling of their familiar late-night ritual. Musk, his point made, leaned back, his expression a blend of defiance and satisfaction, as if he had finally said what needed saying. Colbert, grappling to salvage the moment, forced a laugh, but it was hollow, a reflex rather than a response. He tried to pivot, launching into a question about Musk's space exploration ventures, hoping to shift focus to a less contentious topic. But the attempt was futile. The audience was still reeling from the verbal carnage, and Musk wasn't ready to let the tension dissipate. He answered briefly, his tone curt, before circling back to the core of their clash. The media's role. In shaping public perception, Musk spoke with a quiet intensity, accusing outlets like Colbert's of cherry-picking stories to fuel outrage while ignoring deeper truths. His words resonated with a portion of the audience, who clapped in agreement while others bristled, loyal to the host's brand of commentary. The exchange grew increasingly personal as Colbert, stung by the ongoing assault on his credibility, pushed back with a renewed edge. He challenged Musk's motives, suggesting that his critiques of the media were a smokescreen for his own agenda, a way to control narratives rather than liberate them. The accusation was bold, meant to rally the audience to his side, but it only fueled Musk's resolve. The guest fired back, his voice steady but laced with contempt, pointing out that Colbert's platform thrived on division, profiting from the very polarization he claimed to critique. The audience gasped, the room crackling with the intensity of the confrontation. Musk's words weren't just a defense, they were an indictment, and they hit their mark. The breaking point came when Colbert, his composure fraying, made a desperate move. He stood, his voice rising as he declared that Musk's refusal to engage constructively was derailing the show. It was a power play, an attempt to reassert dominance by framing Musk as the problem. But the guest was unfazed. In a move that would become the night's defining moment, Musk rose to his feet, his presence commanding the room. With a voice that cut through the chaos, he told Colbert that if the host couldn't handle a real conversation, perhaps he didn't belong behind that desk. The audience erupted, a cacophony of cheers and boos as Musk's words landed like a final blow. Colbert, visibly shaken, gestured toward the stage exit, his voice tight as he told Musk to leave. The guest obliged, walking off with a defiant stride, leaving the host alone under the glaring lights, the weight of his defeat palpable. The studio felt cavernous in the wake of Elon Musk's dramatic exit, the audience's roar fading into a stunned hush. Stephen Colbert stood alone behind his desk, the spotlight unforgiving, illuminating the strain etched across his face. His attempt to eject Musk had backfired spectacularly, the guest's parting words, a searing challenge to Colbert's legitimacy, hanging heavy in the air. The crowd, still processing the chaos, was a fractured mosaic of reactions. Some clapped in solidarity with Colbert, others whispered in awe of Musk's audacity. The host, his hands trembling slightly, sank back into his chair, his usual polish, replaced by a raw vulnerability that was both jarring and human. The show, meant to be a controlled dance of wit and charm, had spiraled into something unscripted and visceral. Colbert, ever the professional, tried to regroup. He addressed the audience directly, his voice unsteady but resolute, acknowledging the intensity of the exchange. He framed it as a clash of perspectives, a necessary friction in a world of complex ideas, but the words felt like a bandage on a gaping wound. The audience could see the cracks in his composure. Some nodded, appreciating his attempt to reclaim the narrative, while others remained fixated on Musk's departure, their murmurs suggesting a shift in allegiance. The host's effort to pivot to a lighter segment, a pre-planned comedy bit, fell flat, the laughter sparse and forced. The energy in the room was still tethered to the confrontation, and Colbert seemed to know it, his eyes darting nervously to the crowd. Behind the scenes, the production team scrambled to manage the fallout. Producers whispered urgently, debating whether to cut to a commercial or let Colbert ride out the storm. The decision was made to stay live, a gamble that the host could salvage the moment. Colbert, sensing the weight of the opportunity, abandoned the script entirely. He leaned forward, his voice softening as he spoke candidly about the role of shows like his in navigating a polarized world. He admitted to missteps, acknowledging that his jabs at Musk might have crossed a line. The confession was raw, a rare glimpse of humility that silenced the room. For a moment, the audience connected with him, not as a performer, but as a person grappling with the limits of his platform. But the shadow of Musk's exit loomed large. As Colbert spoke, a portion of the crowd remained restless, their attention lingering on the guest who had turned the tables so decisively. The host's vulnerability, while genuine, couldn't erase the memory of Musk's commanding presence, his willingness to confront the system head-on. Colbert pushed through, his words gaining strength as he vowed to keep challenging powerful figures, even if it meant risking moments like this. The audience responded with tentative applause, some moved by his sincerity, others still wrestling with the night's upheaval. The segment ended with Colbert staring into the camera, his expression a mix of defiance and doubt as the show cut to commercial. The battle was over, but the war for the audience's loyalty was far from decided. The commercial break ended, and the studio lights flared back to life, casting Stephen Colbert in a solitary glow. The audience, still reeling from the night's upheaval, settled into an uneasy anticipation, their earlier division softened by the host's raw candor before the break. Colbert, his posture straighter now, exuded a quiet resolve, as if the brief pause had allowed him to reclaim a piece of himself. The sting of Elon Musk's departure and the guest's devastating verbal assault lingered, but Colbert was determined to end the show on his terms. The crowd sensed this shift, their murmurs quieting as they waited to see how he would navigate the wreckage of the evening's clash. Rather than retreat to the safety of scripted humor, Colbert leaned into the moment, addressing the audience, with a clarity that felt earned. He spoke of the power of open dialogue, even when it was messy or uncomfortable, and acknowledged the role of figures like Musk in pushing boundaries, however polarizing their methods. His words were measured, neither an apology nor a capitulation, but a recognition of the complexity of the issues they'd grappled with: artificial intelligence, media influence, and the fragile balance of public trust. The audience listened, intently, some nodding, others visibly moved by his willingness to confront the chaos head-on. The vulnerability he'd shown earlier had paved the way for this moment of strength, and it resonated. Colbert then turned the conversation outward, inviting the audience to reflect on their own role in shaping discourse. He challenged them to question the narratives they consumed, whether from talk shows, social media, or powerful voices like Musk's. It was a bold move, transforming the night's debacle into a call for collective responsibility. The crowd responded with applause, not the raucous cheers of earlier segments, but a steady, thoughtful affirmation. Even those who had sided with Musk seemed to respect Colbert's pivot, his ability to rise from the ashes of humiliation and reclaim the stage. The host's eyes, once clouded with doubt, now carried a spark of defiance, a silent vow to keep fighting the battles that mattered. As the show drew to a close, Colbert stood, his voice steady, as he thanked the audience for weathering the storm. With him, he cracked a small, self-deprecating joke about surviving tough guests, earning a genuine laugh that broke the lingering tension. The crowd rose to their feet, their ovation a testament to the emotional journey they'd shared. Colbert had been knocked down, exposed, and challenged, but he emerged not as a defeated host, but as a figure who could face the fire and come out stronger. The cameras panned across the audience, capturing their faces, some inspired, others still processing, but all engaged. The show ended with Colbert waving, his smile hard-won and authentic, a triumphant note that needed no further escalation. The night had been a crucible, and he had forged something enduring from it.